You ever watch someone destroy their own life with a single phone call? Because that's exactly what Patricia Whitmore did the night she tried to have me arrested on my own property. The rain hit the hood of my truck in slow, heavy drops as I turned onto Lake Hollow Road just after 9:30 p.m. The windshield wipers dragged across the glass with that tired rubber squeak that always reminds me of long court days and bad weather rolling in from the north side of the lake. I could already smell wet pine drifting through the cracked window mixed with cold asphalt and engine heat. My cabin sat another half-mile down the shoreline past the marina gate, tucked behind cedar trees and old stone fencing most people in Belmere County didn't even know existed anymore. I bought that place 12 years ago after my divorce finalized and every courtroom in Chicago started feeling smaller than a prison cell. That cabin was the only quiet thing left in my life. No cameras. No reporters. No attorneys pretending to shake your hand while calculating how to bury you later. Just lake water, cedar smoke, and silence. Or at least it used to be silence. The first thing I noticed that night was the floodlights. Bright white beams cut through the rain and bounced off the puddles like police search lamps. Then came the gate. Black iron. Fresh paint. Massive stone pillars on both sides with a polished bronze sign bolted across the center. Willow Ridge Lake Community. Private property. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I slowed to a stop about 20 feet from the entrance. 2 HOA security carts blocked the road behind the gate, amber hazard lights blinking through the storm. And standing there under a white golf umbrella like she owned the entire county was Patricia Whitmore herself. Blonde hair perfectly curled despite the weather. Cream-colored trench coat. Clipboard tucked under one arm. Even from inside my truck, I could smell her expensive perfume every time the wind shifted. Sweet at first. Bitter underneath. The kind of scent that lingers long after the person leaves the room. She stepped forward before I even opened my door. "There he is," she snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's the trespasser." Red and blue lights flashed behind me so suddenly they painted the rainwater on my mirrors purple. Sheriff's deputies. 2 SUVs. One young officer climbed out immediately with his hand resting near his belt while another spoke into a shoulder radio. Patricia pointed directly at me like she was introducing a criminal to a firing squad. "He's been illegally entering community property for weeks," she announced. "We have residents terrified." I killed the engines slowly and stepped out into the rain. Cold water soaked through my jacket collar while the smell of wet gravel and diesel exhaust filled the air around us. One deputy approached carefully. Young kid. Couldn't have been older than 26. "Sir," he said, "I'm gonna need you to step away from the vehicle." I looked past him toward the cabin lights barely visible through the trees beyond the gate. My cabin. My dock. My shoreline. Then I looked at Patricia Whitmore smiling beneath that umbrella like she'd finally won something. I reached into my coat pocket slowly while 3 flashlights immediately locked onto my hands. The deputy stiffened. Patricia actually laughed. "Careful," she said. "People like him always get difficult when they're caught." I pulled out a leather wallet instead. Dark brown. Weathered edges. The same wallet I'd carried into federal courtrooms for 22 years. The deputy took the ID card from my hand, glanced down once, then froze completely. Rain dripped off the brim of his hat while the radio's static behind him suddenly sounded very, very loud. Patricia kept talking, still confident, still smiling, still digging her own grave one sentence at a time. And that's when I realized something important. Nobody had bothered to read the property records before they tried to throw me off my own land. The deputy kept staring at my identification card like it had suddenly become radioactive in his hands. Rainwater dripped off the edge of the plastic while the flashing patrol lights bounced across his face in nervous red and blue waves. "Judge Caldwell?" he finally said, quieter this time. The confidence in his voice had evaporated completely. Patricia took one sharp step forward beneath her umbrella. "Do not let him intimidate you," she snapped. "I do not care what he claims to be. He is trespassing on Willow Ridge property. The older deputy standing near the second SUV suddenly looked up from his radio. I recognized him immediately. Deputy Frank Holloway. Late 50s. Thick gray mustache. Former bailiff from the federal courthouse downtown nearly a decade ago. He had aged since then, but not enough to miss the expression that crossed his face the second he saw me standing there in the rain. His shoulders stiffened instantly. "Oh no," he muttered under his breath. The young deputy handed my identification over without another word. Holloway studied it for less than 2 seconds before rubbing one hand across his jaw like he already felt a headache coming. Patricia kept talking anyway. People like her always do. "This man has repeatedly entered private community land after being warned," she said loudly. "Our homeowners are frightened. He has been harassing residents for months." I could hear the lake behind the trees now. Wind pushing small waves against the dock pilings. The same hollow wooden knocking sound I used to fall asleep to every weekend after long trial calendars back in Chicago. Funny thing about silence. Once you spend 20 years listening to criminals lie under oath, you start appreciating places where nobody talks at all. That cabin became my refuge after my divorce. No court reporters. No cameras waiting outside federal buildings. No attorneys pretending morality depended on billable hours. I bought the property 12 years earlier from an old retired architect named Walter Grayson. 53 acres wrapped around the north edge of Belmere Lake with a private easement road running through what used to be undeveloped timberland. Back then there was no HOA. No luxury marina. No decorative gates or golf cart patrols pretending to be law enforcement. Just cedar trees, fishing docks, and old cabins people left unlocked because nobody around here stole from neighbors. Then Willow Ridge arrived. Investors from Atlanta bought the southern shoreline 6 years ago and turned half the lake into what Patricia liked calling an executive waterfront community. Translation: oversized homes with artificial stone entrances and residents who thought expensive landscaping qualified as personality. Patricia Whitmore became HOA president within 8 months. According to county records, she ran unopposed. That told me almost everything I needed to know. People do not avoid elections unless they are already tired of dealing with the winner. Holloway finally cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "there seems to be some confusion regarding the ownership of this access road." Patricia actually laughed. Short. Sharp. Condescending. "There is no confusion. We acquired this road under the Community Expansion Agreement last spring." I slid my truck door shut slowly behind me. The cold metal clicked through the rain. "Did you now?" I asked. The younger deputy looked back and forth between us like a man realizing halfway through a traffic stop that he had accidentally walked into a federal hearing. Patricia pointed toward the gate again. "This road belongs to Willow Ridge Lake Community. We have filed the paperwork." That sentence right there told me everything. Filed paperwork. Not approved. Not validated. Not recorded correctly. Just filed. I could almost smell the fraud underneath the wet asphalt and fresh concrete. Holloway shifted uncomfortably beside the patrol vehicle. "Ma'am," he said again, more serious this time, "Judge Caldwell is listed as owner of Parcel 14 North Shore Access according to county tax maps." Patricia's smile finally twitched for the first time all night. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. And after 22 years on the federal bench, I learned something important about people. The moment confidence cracks, the truth usually starts leaking out right behind it. Patricia Whitmore recovered faster than most people would have. I would give her that much. The woman had spent years weaponizing confidence against people too intimidated to question her, and habits like that do not disappear overnight. She tightened her grip on the umbrella handle until her knuckles turned pale under the flashing patrol lights. Then that artificial smile returned like somebody flipping a switch back on. "This is ridiculous," she said. "I do not care who he is. This community legally purchased shoreline access rights 6 months ago." Holloway glanced toward me carefully, like he already knew the answer and was hoping he was wrong. I slipped one hand into my coat pocket and pulled out my keys. The brass cabin key scraped softly against the leather keychain Walter Grayson gave me the day we finalized the sale. North Shore Parcel 14. The engraving had faded over the years from lake water and cold winters, but it was still there. "Deputy," I said calmly, "would you mind asking Ms. Whitmore exactly who sold her those access rights?" Rain hissed against the pavement, while Patricia hesitated for half a second too long. That was another thing 22 years on the federal bench teaches you. Silence has weight. Honest people answer quickly. Dishonest people search for safe wording first. "The developer handled the transaction," she finally said. "Everything was processed through Willow Ridge Holdings." I nodded once. Interesting. The smell of wet cedar drifted down from the tree line behind the gate. Somewhere out on the lake, thunder rolled low enough to shake the dock chains. Patricia noticed Holloway watching her now instead of me, and suddenly her tone sharpened again. "This man has harassed our residents for months," she snapped. "Driving through private roads. Using restricted marina access. Ignoring posted warnings." I almost laughed hearing that. The marina she called restricted sat on land that used to belong to old man Walter Grayson before the developers carved it into luxury lots. I remembered fishing off that shoreline years before Willow Ridge existed. Back when kids rode bicycles down dirt paths instead of golf carts with HOA logos stamped on the side. Patricia had never known the lake before money arrived. People like her rarely care about history unless they can sell it by the square foot. The younger deputy shifted nervously beside my truck. Rainwater dripped off his flashlight while he looked toward the gate cameras mounted above the stone pillars. Brand new equipment. Expensive setup. I had noticed them the moment I arrived. Patricia followed his gaze immediately. "Everything is recorded," she said proudly. "We document every unauthorized entry." There it was. Another mistake. The air felt colder suddenly. Not because of the storm. Because I realized she had probably spent months collecting evidence against herself without understanding it yet. Holloway rubbed one hand across his forehead. "Ma'am," he said carefully, "did the county approve reassignment of Parcel 14 access easements?" Patricia's expression hardened instantly. "Our attorneys handled everything." Not yes. Not approved. Handled. Lawyers become very careful with language when they know paperwork might not survive scrutiny. I stepped closer to the gate slowly, boots crunching against soaked gravel. The floodlights reflected off the black iron bars and illuminated fresh welding marks near the hinges. Cheap rushed work. Probably installed within the last 2 weeks. "You know what bothers me most about all this?" I asked quietly. Patricia crossed her arms. "What?" I looked through the bars toward the narrow road disappearing into the cedar trees toward my cabin. "Somebody spent a fortune building gates on property they never actually owned." Nobody spoke for several seconds after that. Just rain. Radio static. Water hitting asphalt. Then Patricia made the mistake that changed everything. She stepped forward and pointed directly at me in front of both deputies and the security cameras. "Arrest him anyway," she said. "I will deal with the legal side later." Holloway's entire face changed the second those words left her mouth. And in that moment I knew this was no longer just an HOA dispute. This had become evidence. The rain kept falling, but the mood around that gate changed completely after Patricia said those 4 words. Arrest him anyway. Even the younger deputy looked uncomfortable hearing it out loud. You could almost feel the temperature drop beneath those floodlights. Holloway straightened slowly beside the patrol SUV and folded his arms across his chest. The old instincts were kicking in now. I had seen that look before on bailiffs and federal marshals right before a courtroom disaster. Unfolded. Patricia noticed it too, but instead of backing down, she doubled down harder. People drunk on small authority usually do. "This man has been undermining our community for months," she continued, voice sharp enough to cut through the rain. "He refuses to cooperate with HOA regulations. He drives through restricted areas. He intimidates residents." The funny thing was I barely spoke to anyone around the lake. Most mornings I spent repairing my dock or fishing before sunrise while Willow Ridge residents slept behind blackout curtains and imported landscaping. But Patricia needed a villain. Communities like hers always do. Fear keeps people obedient. I leaned one arm against my truck and watched water stream down the iron gate. "Deputy," I said calmly, "would you mind asking Ms. Whitmore when exactly this road became community property?" Holloway looked at her immediately. "Ma'am?" Patricia hesitated again. Tiny pause. Barely noticeable unless you spent decades listening to witnesses search for lies that sounded legal. "The transfer process began earlier this year," she answered carefully. "With whom?" Holloway asked. "Willow Ridge Holdings." "No," I said quietly. "Who transferred my land?" Her jaw tightened instantly. There it was again. That crack in the armor widening by the second. Thunder rolled across Belmere Lake while the security cameras above the gate blinked steady little red lights into the darkness. Recording everything. Every word. Every false statement. Every instruction she gave police officers on property she did not own. Patricia turned toward the deputies with growing frustration. "I cannot believe this is even happening right now. We have homeowners paying millions of dollars to live in a secure gated community. On land connected by my easement road," I replied. Her eyes narrowed. "That road was abandoned." I almost smiled hearing that one. Abandoned property law. Developers love using it because most landowners never bother reading county statutes until it is too late. Unfortunately for Patricia Whitmore, I spent 22 years watching attorneys weaponize technical language in federal courtrooms. And unlike most people she bullied, I actually understood the paperwork. "No," I said. "And used is not abandoned. Not legally. Not in this county." Holloway shifted uncomfortably again. He already knew where this conversation was headed. The younger deputy definitely did not. Poor kid looked trapped between academy training and the realization that his complainant might be committing fraud in real time. Patricia stepped closer to me then, umbrella tilted against the wind. Her expensive perfume mixed strangely with wet concrete and lake water. "You think being a judge makes you untouchable?" she asked quietly. I looked at the bronze HOA sign bolted across my access road. Fresh screws. Fresh polish. Fresh arrogance. "No," I answered. "But it does mean I know exactly how dangerous fake paperwork can become." Silence again. Then Holloway exhaled heavily through his nose and reached for his radio. "Dispatch," he said. "I need county property verification on Parcel 14 North Shore access and all recent easement filings attached to Willow Ridge Holdings." Patricia's face changed immediately. Not panic yet. But close. The storm wind pushed rain sideways through the gate, while one of the security guards slowly backed his golf cart farther away from the conversation. Smart man. He could probably smell trouble now, too. I glanced toward the shoreline beyond the trees where faint cabin lights reflected off the black water. My father used to tell me something when I first became a prosecutor back in Illinois. He said powerful people rarely believe consequences apply to them until they hear paperwork sliding across a desk with their own name typed at the top. Standing there in the rain watching Patricia Whitmore lose control of the situation inch by inch, I had a feeling she was about to learn that lesson personally. Dispatch came back 3 minutes later, and those were probably the longest 3 minutes Patricia Whitmore had experienced in years. Nobody moved much during that time. Rain hammered the lake road. Patrol lights reflected across the wet stone entrance pillars like emergency beacons outside a crime scene. One of the security guards pretended to adjust the batteries in his flashlight just to avoid eye contact with anyone. Smart instinct. The dispatcher's voice finally crackled through Holloway's radio in short bursts of static. "Parcel 14 North Shore access currently registered to Ethan Marshall Caldwell under county tax records and original easement protections filed 1998. No approved transfer recorded. Repeat, no approved transfer recorded through county registry." Holloway closed his eyes briefly like a man feeling an incoming migraine settle behind them. The younger deputy shifted awkwardly beside him. Patricia's smile vanished completely this time. That cannot be correct, she snapped immediately. Our attorneys filed the acquisition documents months ago. Filed, I repeated calmly. Not approved. The wind pushed cold rain sideways through the open gate, while the bronze HOA sign rattled softly against the mounting bolts. Cheap installation. Probably rushed through by contractors who thought paperwork would catch up later. That happens more than people realize. Developers start building first and assume legal ownership will magically fix itself afterward. Most of the time they pressure local officials hard enough to make it work. Most of the time the property owner does not happen to be a federal judge with 30 years of courtroom experience. Patricia stepped toward Holloway now instead of me. Deputy, this man is interfering with a lawful community operation. Holloway stared at her for 2 full seconds before answering. Ma'am, according to county records, this road still belongs to Judge Caldwell. That is impossible. No, I said quietly. Just inconvenient. Her jaw tightened so hard I could hear her teeth click from 6 feet away. The woman was unraveling now, but the dangerous part about people like Patricia is they usually become more reckless once control starts slipping. She pointed toward the gate cameras mounted above us. Everything here has been documented, she said sharply. Every interaction. Every warning notice. Every trespassing incident. I looked up at the blinking red recording lights again. Good, I answered. That saves discovery time later. The younger deputy glanced between us nervously. He definitely understood that sentence. Courtrooms terrify young officers because paperwork never forgets anything. Holloway lowered the radio slowly. Ma'am, who instructed your contractors to install this gate? Patricia folded her arms tightly against the rain. Willow Ridge Holdings approved the expansion. Did the county? Silence. There it was again. That heavy, dangerous silence dishonest people always create when truth becomes expensive. I could smell wet mulch from the landscaping beds lining the entrance road. Fresh sod, too. They had spent hundreds of thousands transforming this shoreline into a gated luxury postcard without ever securing the legal access road underneath it. Incredible arrogance. But arrogance leaves receipts. And receipts become evidence. Patricia finally exhaled sharply through her nose. This is harassment, she muttered. No, Holloway replied carefully. This is a property dispute with possible fraudulent filings attached. The moment he said fraudulent filings, her face changed completely. Tiny flicker around the eyes. Barely visible. Fear. Real fear this time. Because now she understood the problem. This situation had moved beyond HOA intimidation tactics and neighborhood politics. Fraud connected to land transfers meant subpoenas, financial reviews, county investigators, state records audits. All the ugly things wealthy communities assume only happen to other people. Thunder rolled across the lake again, while rainwater streamed down the black iron bars between us. I reached into my truck and pulled out the old leather briefcase resting behind the passenger seat. Dark brown. Worn corners. Brass latches scratched from decades of federal courthouse floors. Patricia stared at it immediately. Instinct. People recognize danger before they understand it. I set the case carefully on the hood of my truck and flipped open the locks. The smell of old paper and leather drifted into the cold night air. Inside sat property maps, easement records, county surveys, and one very specific document folded neatly on top. A temporary injunction request I had drafted 3 weeks earlier after Willow Ridge first blocked my marina access. Holloway looked down at the paperwork and quietly muttered one sentence under his breath. Oh, this is bad. Holloway was right. It was bad. Not just embarrassing HOA drama bad. Federal investigation level bad. Rain tapped steadily against the leather briefcase while I opened the injunction paperwork beneath the floodlights. The paper edges curled slightly from the humidity, carrying that dry courthouse smell of ink, old toner, and archived records. Funny how legal documents always smell the same no matter what state you are standing in. Patricia stared at the papers like they were written in another language. In a way, they probably were. Most people hear words like easement violation and assume it means paperwork delays. What it actually means is lawsuits expensive enough to bankrupt entire developments. I slid the county survey map across the hood of my truck. Water droplets scattered over the laminated surface while the deputies leaned closer. Thick red lines marked the original easement boundaries running directly beneath the brand new gate and security checkpoint. Patricia immediately shook her head. That map is outdated. No, I replied calmly. That map is certified. Holloway looked toward the gate pillars again. Jesus Christ. The younger deputy finally spoke up. Ma'am, did your contractors check county approvals before construction? Patricia crossed her arms tighter. Our attorneys assured us everything was legal. That sentence hit the air like a falling brick. Attorneys assured us. Not approved. Not confirmed. Assured. Another careful dodge. Another sentence that would sound very interesting during sworn testimony later. The rain softened slightly overhead, turning from pounding sheets into a cold, steady drizzle. Somewhere farther down the shoreline, a boat buoy clanged against metal in the wind. I recognized the sound instantly. Walter Grayson's old buoy marker near the north dock. He used to complain about that noise every winter while drinking black coffee on the porch wrapped in 2 flannel jackets. Funny what survives after people disappear. Patricia cleared her throat sharply. This community invested over $12 million into shoreline restoration and infrastructure on land connected by fraudulent access filings. I answered. You do understand that makes every sale disclosure legally vulnerable now, correct? Silence again. But this silence felt different. Heavier. Colder. The kind of silence people create once they realize consequences are becoming real. Holloway slowly flipped through the injunction requests resting on my truck hood. His flashlight beam stopped halfway down the second page. Judge, he muttered carefully. You already prepared this? 3 weeks ago. Patricia's eyes snapped toward me. 3 weeks? I nodded once. Right around the time your contractors replaced my marina lock and started towing guests from my property. She opened her mouth immediately. Closed it again. There it was. The exact moment she realized this situation had never been under her control at all. While she spent months pretending to rule Belmere Lake with HOA fines and security patrols, I had quietly been documenting every violation attached to Willow Ridge Holdings. Every false notice. Every restricted access sign. Every unapproved construction permit. And thanks to those gate cameras above us, she had now added false police reporting and unlawful detainment attempts directly into the evidence file herself. The younger deputy looked physically uncomfortable now. Ma'am, he said cautiously, did anybody from the county actually sign off on this gate installation? Patricia looked toward the security guards near the carts like somebody searching for an escape route in real time. Nobody moved. Smart employees know exactly when their paycheck is no longer worth involvement. Finally, she straightened her posture again and forced that brittle realtor smile back onto her face. This is just a misunderstanding, she said. I am sure our legal department can clear everything up quickly. I almost admired the instinct. Even cornered people cling to confidence like a life raft. But confidence does not erase records. Holloway slowly closed the injunction folder and handed it back to me. Judge Caldwell, he said carefully, I strongly recommend you file this first thing tomorrow morning. I locked the brass latches shut again. Already scheduled. Patricia blinked once. What? I looked directly at her beneath the cold floodlights and steady rain. Federal clerk receives the filing package at 8:30 tomorrow morning. For the first time all night, Patricia Whitmore looked genuinely afraid. The gate opened for me 20 minutes later. Not because Patricia wanted it to. Because Holloway quietly told the security guards to move the carts before somebody turned a civil dispute into a departmental complaint. The iron hinges groaned as the floodlights reflected across wet pavement leading toward my cabin through the cedar trees. I drove slowly past Patricia without saying another word. She stood frozen beside the stone pillar, clutching that white umbrella like it was the last piece of authority she still had left. But the real damage had already happened. She just did not understand how much yet. The cabin lights glowed warm against the rain when I finally pulled into the driveway. The familiar smell of damp cedar siding and lake water wrapped around me the second I stepped out of the truck. For the first time all night, everything went quiet except for wind moving through the trees and rain tapping softly against the dock below the hill. That silence always felt earned out here. Back in Chicago, silence usually meant somebody was hiding something. At Belmere Lake, silence meant the world had finally stopped demanding things from you for 5 minutes. I carried the leather briefcase inside and set it on the kitchen table beside the old brass lamp Walter Grayson left behind with the property. The bulb flickered once before filling the room with soft amber light. Same lamp. Same wooden table. Same courthouse folders stacked in careful rows exactly where I left them 3 weeks earlier. I poured black coffee into a chipped ceramic mug and sat down while rain streaked across the windows overlooking the lake. Then I opened the second folder. That was the folder Patricia Whitmore did not know existed. Most people think legal cases begin with anger. They do not. Good cases begin with patterns. Patterns become timelines. Timelines become evidence. And evidence destroys people far more effectively than shouting ever will. The first complaint against Willow Ridge landed in my mailbox 4 months earlier. Handwritten letter from an elderly resident named Margaret Ellis. 78 years old. Widow. Lived 2 roads south of the marina. According to her letter, the HOA threatened fines after she refused to surrender part of her shoreline access for what Patricia called community landscaping expansion. Margaret included photographs. Stakes pushed into her lawn. Spray paint markings near her dock. Contractor trucks parked inches from her garden. I remembered the smell of old paper and lavender perfume when I unfolded that letter the first time. My mother used the same perfume when I was a child. That detail stuck with me. 3 weeks later, another resident contacted me quietly after recognizing my name from county records. Then another. Same pattern every time. Elderly property owners. Longtime residents. People unfamiliar with land law or intimidated by expensive attorneys carrying developer business cards. Willow Ridge Holdings would pressure them with revised access agreements, temporary construction notices, and complicated filing language most people never fully understood. Some signed out of fear. Others signed because they thought they had no choice. But one thing bothered me more than anything else. Every disputed property connected back to the same legal consultant. Carter and Vale Urban Development Services. Atlanta-based. Aggressive expansion history. 3 prior lawsuits involving easement manipulation in neighboring states. I still remember the metallic taste of courthouse coffee the night I stayed up until 2 in the morning reviewing those filings on my laptop while thunder rolled across the lake outside. The deeper I looked, the uglier it became. Selective enforcement. Questionable transfer filings. Construction permits submitted before land approvals finalized. Patricia Whitmore had not built an HOA. She had built a machine designed to pressure people into surrendering property rights quietly enough to avoid scrutiny. And tonight she made the single worst mistake people like her always make eventually. She involved law enforcement before securing the paperwork. I opened my laptop slowly and connected the external hard drive sitting beside the lamp. Security footage folders filled the screen immediately. Date stamps. Marina lock replacements. Tow truck arrivals. Contractor deliveries. And now, brand new footage from tonight's gate confrontation uploaded directly from the dashboard camera mounted in my truck. Rain streaked across the video, while Patricia's voice echoed clearly through the speakers. Arrest him anyway. I leaned back in the chair and listened to those 3 words twice more while steam rose from the coffee mug into the quiet cabin air. Then I reached for the fountain pen resting beside the injunction folder and began drafting subpoenas. The first subpoena landed at Willow Ridge Holdings headquarters 48 hours later at exactly 9:12 in the morning. I know the time because I signed the delivery confirmation myself while sitting in chambers downtown listening to rain hammer against the courthouse windows again. Funny how storms seemed to follow Patricia Whitmore everywhere. By noon, 3 more subpoenas had gone out. Financial disclosures, contractor communications, easement transfer records, internal HOA correspondence regarding shoreline acquisition projects. The machine started shaking almost immediately after that. You could always tell when people built their authority on intimidation instead of structure. The second somebody demands documentation, everything begins rattling apart. My clerk brought me the first emergency filing request just after lunch. Willow Ridge attorneys trying to delay disclosure deadlines on grounds of administrative confusion. Administrative confusion. That phrase alone told me they were panicking already. Legitimate developments do not fear records requests. Fraudulent ones practically choke on them. The smell of old paper and burnt courthouse coffee filled chambers while I reviewed the filings under fluorescent lights that hummed loud enough to drill into your skull. Outside my office window, Chicago traffic crawled through cold gray rain 17 stories below like a river of brake lights. Patricia probably. Imagine judges spent their days swinging gavels and giving speeches. Real courtrooms are quieter than that. Real destruction happens in silence. One signature. One filing. One denied motion at a time. 3 days after the gate incident, Belmere County investigators arrived at Willow Ridge around sunrise. I know because one of the residents sent me photos anonymously before most people in the neighborhood even woke up. White county vehicles lined along the marina entrance. Survey crews walking property boundaries. Inspectors photographing the gate installation. Contractors suddenly pretending not to know who authorized construction. The best part? Those giant decorative entrance pillars Patricia loved so much had been installed 6 feet inside protected easement boundaries. 6 feet. That tiny measurement mistake alone exposed the entire operation. By Friday afternoon, the first homeowner lawsuits started appearing. Margaret Ellis filed hers first. Then 2 retired couples from the South Shoreline joined together under shared representation. Then another family challenged revised HOA assessments tied to unauthorized infrastructure costs. The pressure spread through Willow Ridge like cracks through frozen glass. Residents started asking questions nobody had dared ask before. Where had the extra assessment money gone? Why were legal fees hidden inside landscaping budgets? Why were security patrols monitoring private easement roads not owned by the HOA? Panic makes communities loud. Suddenly neighborhood message boards filled with arguments. Homeowners demanding records. Board members resigning. One security contractor terminated his agreement publicly after learning the gate sat on disputed land. Another contractor quietly removed his company logo from Willow Ridge maintenance vehicles overnight. Smart move. Nobody wants their business attached to federal filings. Then came the email. Patricia Whitmore herself sent it to every homeowner inside the development at 11:43 that Friday night. I still remember the glow of my laptop screen reflecting across the dark cabin windows while I read it sitting beside the lake. The wind outside carried the smell of cold water and cedar smoke through the porch screens. Patricia called the investigation politically motivated harassment. Claimed outside forces were targeting the community. Claimed I abused judicial influence to intimidate residents. Big mistake. Because attached to that email was a scanned document she should never have distributed publicly. An internal legal memo from Carter and Vale Urban Development Services discussing unresolved easement concerns months before the gate was ever installed. She accidentally proved prior knowledge herself. I actually laughed out loud when I saw it. First real laugh in weeks. Quiet. Short. The kind that escapes before you can stop it. By Monday morning, state investigators requested full access to Willow Ridge accounting records. 2 board members resigned before noon. Carter and Vale stopped returning media calls entirely. And Patricia? Patricia still refused to back down. That was the incredible part. Even while the walls collapsed around her, she kept acting like confidence alone could overpower facts. But facts do not care how expensive your neighborhood looks. Facts do not care about gated entrances or country club memberships or imported stone fountains beside marina docks. Facts sit quietly inside records rooms waiting for somebody patient enough to pull the right folder off the shelf. And after 22 years on the federal bench, patience happened to be the one thing I had mastered better than anybody Patricia Whitmore had ever tried to bully. The gate came down on a cold Tuesday morning just before sunrise. I watched it happen from the porch of my cabin with a black coffee warming my hands while fog rolled slowly across Belmere Lake. The hydraulic torch hissed against the iron hinges, sending sparks into the damp morning air while county contractors dismantled the entire entrance piece by piece. Funny thing about symbols of power. They always look permanent until somebody with actual authority shows up carrying paperwork. The smell of wet steel and burned paint drifted through the cedar trees while workers unbolted the bronze Willow Ridge sign Patricia Whitmore once treated like a crown jewel. By 8 o'clock, the sign was lying face down in the mud beside the road. Nobody stopped to take pictures with it anymore. Nobody even looked at it twice. That was the part one found most interesting. Fear disappears fast once people realize the bully can bleed too. The investigation officially widened 2 weeks after the gate incident. State financial auditors uncovered unauthorized assessment transfers hidden inside infrastructure budgets tied to shoreline expansion projects. Then county investigators discovered altered easement references attached to 3 separate property filings. Carter and Vale Urban Development Services immediately denied responsibility, which usually means responsibility exists in bulk quantities. Patricia resigned from the HOA board 3 days later through a carefully worded public statement claiming she wanted to avoid distracting the community. Distracting. Another one of those polished words wealthy people use when disaster becomes impossible to hide. The residents of Willow Ridge stopped sounding like a luxury community after that. No more cheerful golf cart patrols. No more perfectly curated neighborhood newsletters about waterfront living and community values. Just attorneys arriving in black sedans and nervous homeowners standing in driveways whispering beside mailboxes. The county eventually suspended all pending shoreline development permits connected to Willow Ridge Holdings until ownership reviews finished. Contractors vanished almost overnight. Landscaping crews stopped showing up. Half-completed marina expansions sat abandoned beside the water collecting rain and dead leaves. Even the security patrols disappeared once the lawsuits started multiplying. Turns out intimidation becomes expensive once records requests enter the conversation. I saw Patricia one final time about a month later. Not in court. Not at a hearing. At the county records office of all places. I had stopped by to review updated survey filings tied to Margaret Ellis's property dispute. The building smelled like dust, copier toner, and old paper the way county offices always do. Patricia stood near the back hallway holding a cardboard file box against her chest while speaking quietly. Was somebody from her legal team. No designer trench coat this time. No polished smile. No golf cart kingdom. Just a tired woman staring at a stack of documents that used to make her feel powerful. She noticed me immediately. For a second neither of us spoke. Then she looked away first. That detail mattered more than anything she could have said. Because people like Patricia Whitmore survive on eye contact. On pressure. On making other people feel smaller. The second they stop looking you in the eye, the illusion cracks permanently. I signed my final easement confirmation forms that afternoon using the same fountain pen I carried the night she tried to have me removed from my own property. Heavy black lacquer. Gold trim worn smooth from decades in federal courtrooms. The clerk stamped the paperwork quietly while fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Simple sound. Ink against paper. Rubber seal against file folder. That was it. No dramatic speeches. No courtroom showdown. Just records corrected and authority restored the way real justice usually works. When I drove back to the cabin later that evening, the road to the lake stood open again. No barriers. No guards. No floodlights pretending ownership could be manufactured with enough money and arrogance. The cedar trees swayed softly in the wind while lake water reflected the last orange light of sunset across the dock. I parked beside the porch and listened to the silence settle around Belmere Lake one more time. After everything that happened, the quiet sounded different somehow. Cleaner. Honest. Patricia Whitmore thought power sounded like shouting orders through security gates and threatening people with fake authority. But real power does not scream. Real power signs the paper, opens the file, and waits patiently while the truth does the rest.